like you're doing a job of work, reaching forwards and pulling something in that's quite heavy. There's a real drag to the pull. And a sense that you're just settling into the chore. For me, the people in our society that have the best energy are the physical laborers. The ones that know how to do manual work, and they know how to pace themselves so they can just settle into the work without it stressing them. And there's a certain joy in the physicality. So I'm having to work. I have to pull in because it's difficult to pull in. I have to push out because it's difficult to push out. There's always resistance to our movements. And the best way to cultivate that is to breathe through the small hole in the mouth so that there is resistance to your breathing as well. Breathing is our fundamental action. Now the same thing, but reaching up. I'm reaching up, I'm bringing down a handful of good heaven energy and just letting it into my heart. So if you have a simple image of exchange, then it's a good starting place for any exercise. Then the fists down to the hips and just turning, punching to the side, trying to get your head round as far as you can. You're punching to the wall, but you're trying to look behind yourself. And now let's try a bit of a palming. So just rubbing the hands. As soon as you start rubbing the hands, just feel the eyes preparing themselves. They're sinking inside. The eyes are looking down into the down chin from the back. Keep the shoulders relaxing into this action. The shoulders will tend to bunch up as you rub the hands. Tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth and keep breathing through the small hole. And then just stretch the arms out and bring the hands over the eyes. The important thing here is to block out all of the light. You can have the eyes open or closed. What I tend to do is as I breathe in, my eyes open, and as I breathe out, my eyes close almost. So the eyes are sort of breathing with your own breathing, but they're not looking at anything. The eyes aren't being used to see. They're being used to help the process of becoming internally quiet. Try and keep the shoulders relaxing. The arms may ache. Often people will do this with their elbows on a table. Bringing the hands down. And now the blinking. clenching the fists, clenching the eyes, pulling in the belly, and then opening everything. And then some quick blinking. Interlocking the fingers, but behind the back, and just trying to straighten the arms. So your shoulders are being pulled backwards, your shoulder blades are pinching together at the back. What you'd like to do is to be able to lift the hands from the ground, from the cushion. Cupping your two elbows. And just hold it for a minute or so, just to help the spine straighten up. So we live in a culture where if you're adult, it's de rigueur to be depressed, and you're considered somewhat lazy and childish if you're cheerful. So here, I just want the heart to feel like it wants to look upwards. Prayer is the lifting of heart to God. William James said, the traditional cure for depression is prayer. Depression is simply a heavy heart, a downcast heart, a heart that can't find it in itself to lift up. All spiritual work is simply prayer. It's just trying to lift the heart upwards as a natural consequence of being alive. Just move leg to leg. Students often ask, why do we always start with this exercise? And is all I can say really is, I don't know. It's, in a way, it's easier to get into the sinking if we move a little bit. If we just stand in riding horse, it will always tend to freeze up, stiffen up a little bit. So I want to feel myself sinking into the leg. And then I move and sink into this leg. Sink and relax. The first two instructions traditionally in the first Tai Chi class, mind in Dan Qian and sink and relax. So it's relaxation in the sense of letting go. If you let go, then gravity will take you down. So for the Chinese, it's just one word, sum. But it has this real sense of release to it. I remember reading an interview with Jasper Johns. Is after he'd got through his flags and targets phase, and he started painting these large canvases that were very painterly, but it'd often stick like an object onto the surface after he'd finished it. And this one painting had a coat hanger, just a wire coat hanger stuck on the surface. And the interviewer said to him, you know, what does the coat hanger mean? Why did you put the coat hanger there? And he just said, I have no idea, but if you like, I'll invent a reason for you. And so the interviewer said, okay. And so he then gave this very plausible symbolic reason for the coat hanger. But of course, it had nothing to do with that. The reasons always come after the event. The explanations have no spirit. Now we can just bring it back into some sort of still riding horse. But I want to feel the movement. It's the whole idea of our meditation is that when we're still, we are feeling the movement within the stillness, the equilibrium. Moving from leg to leg relaxes across here, across the back of the sacrum into the hips, so that I can get a sense of my sacrum releasing my legs away from it, so that the energy that's flowing down my spine can split and flow down my legs. I need to get this sacrum slightly forwards. If it won't come, then just lean back a little bit. I want to feel as though my sacrum is directly beneath my heart, and that will give my heart a buoyant thrust upwards. So in a sense, prayer is just posture. If you've got the right posture, you will be naturally praying. But it does help if you can quieten the mind. And now let's just turn. Try and keep the eyes just sweeping the room. Your eyes aren't attaching onto anything. As soon as your eyes look at something, you're distracted. You want the feeling that the eyes are looking inside. The eyes are digging down into your dantian. My body is the cave of the soul. The soul is the cave of the Holy Spirit. You know what it's like when you sort of look in the mirror, especially as we get older. What you see in the mirror is aging, and yet you don't feel any older. So you get a real sense as you age that very much you are not the body. The body is just something that you happen to be inside. My 100-year-old, I mean, she looks 100, but there's a picture on her mantelpiece of her when she's 19, looking very spirited and naughty. And she just says to me, I feel exactly the same as I did in that photograph. So inside, she's still 19. Try and make sure it's the hips are turning. It's actually really difficult turning. So as I turn away from the leg, I really have to release in the hip and the sacroiliac so that my turning doesn't take the leg with me like this. So as I turn, I can sort of leave the leg behind. Feel the centrifugal. So the joy of the body being flung away from the center, like being on a swing. And then feel the mind trying to find the still center, the quiet mind needs stillness. So it will always look for it. And that's my Dantian. And my Dantian is right in the middle of this movement. Everything's swirling around it, and yet it is quite still. And then going into the second one. Now I'm just moving my body as much as possible, so from leg to leg. And yet the turning is exactly the same. I want this real sense that I'm turning around this center. And let's try a little bit of the third one, which we don't often do. Pivoting on the ball of the foot, the real sense that you're releasing something from your hand. Turning, but you're turning in order to release something tangentially to your circle. Now let's just try the one where we make a circle. Just trying not to incline the back too much. So when I go down, it's because my legs bend. And the other one. I'm just winding it down. And then let's try some of the heart qigong. And then just breathing, letting the spine very simply just flex forwards and back. Here you're withdrawing into your darkness, into your dantian. Here you're emerging astonished. The same thing really, but now just making more of a figure of eight of it. So when we just do the breathing normally, the hands are just coming in and out, moving towards each other, moving away from each other. But now I want to do the same thing, but I'm making a figure of eight with the two hands. So here, as I go around the bottom of my figures of eights, I'm pulling the belly in. And then as I go over the top of the figure of eights, I'm opening out, closing down, withdrawing, and then opening up and emerging. Allow the two arms to be slightly out of phase. So one leads for a moment and then the other one leads. Basically, you're turning all the time. There's these little turns which you can actually make quite big if you want. Constant turning side to side that keeps it loose, well oiled, and playful. A mind that is always willing to turn, a mind that cannot not turn, a playful mind, a well-oiled mind. Now let's just settle in riding horse for a moment. Just to feel the movement, really. So it's only really when we come back to this stillness that we can feel the energy moving. If you're moving with the energy, it's difficult to feel the energy. So I'm just standing still with my sinking, my central equilibrium, and just feeling this detail in my energy. And this one where we just lift the heel. Or lift the knee, really. The knee lifting brings up the heel. The knees of the heart. The knee lifts because there's a lift in my heart. There's a cheerfulness that overcomes me. And that expresses as my knee lifting. Like a dance. One heel lifts, the other heel goes down. The heel that goes down is where my root is establishing itself. So in order for there to be lightness, there must also be heaviness. Here I'm just splitting them so that the lightness is in one side of my body and the heaviness is in the other side. And that will encourage turning as well. Keep it turning. Keep the head moving. We're trying to keep the dantian relatively still all the time. So in a sense, my dantian is the point in my body that moves the least. And the parts furthest from the dantian are obviously the parts that move the most. So my hands, clearly, but also my feet and my head. So my head should be moving much more than my dantian. And then just jogging on the spot, really, really lightly. You're barely lifting the feet. It's like a really lazy jog. I want to feel that lilt side to side, not just in my body, but in my mind. Feels like my brain is sloshing around side to side inside my skull. Like you're rocking yourself to sleep. At least rocking yourself into reverie, into like a daydream. You're just drifting. You're not thinking about anything, but your mind is not focused. Just quickly into just going backwards and forwards, the same feeling. You're just moving from leg to leg. A sense of this sort of weaving or stitching. There's a thread that's twisting from side to side, always in the figure of eight. Never quite goes back the way it came. Round the front foot, round the back foot, round the front foot, round the back foot. This endless loop. A figure of eight, the infinity symbol, the lemniscate. And lazy movement. How that will manifest is a sense that your arms are lagging what your body is doing. So my body is already forwards and my arms haven't finished going backwards yet. So there's this sort of lag. You can't really design it. You just have to let your mind wander. Mind go into like a daydream so that you stop caring what your body's doing. And then your body is more likely to get it right than if you try concentrating and making it conform to a design. You can't design this. Now let's just try figure of eighting. So if we just do the normal figure of eight that's going around the feet, figure of eight's going around this foot, and then it comes and goes around this foot. So both of my hands tend to be with the figure of eight. So both of my hands are going around this foot, and then both of my hands are coming around this foot. So this is the most basic figure of eight. The one has become two. So when we do the figure of eight exercise, effectively what's happening is this foot, this hand is coming up it, it's coming around the foot. And now what we've just been doing, this hand then joins this hand going around this foot. So when we do the figure of eight exercise with the figure of eight in each arm, it doesn't do that. It goes around this foot, but then instead of joining this hand here, it goes back around this foot, but the other direction. So the first direction is this way. And then the opposite direction is going like this. So you end up going around the foot twice, but in opposite directions. So I go around anti-clockwise here, and then it slips and goes clockwise. So this is the figure of eight. It's a circle that goes both ways. And you just pull the two away from each other. So you stretch it out. So you have anti-clockwise here and then clockwise here. And then what we do, in our mind, we just split the foot so that the bottom of the figure of eight goes around the heel and the top of the figure of eight goes around the front of the foot. And then I have a figure of eight within my foot. The other figure of eight, the simple one, is still going on. That's going on in my hips. My hips are just doing this simple looping figure of eight around each foot. But within each foot, there is a complete figure of eight. So this one I'll go up, and now instead of going around this leg with the hand, I go back around this foot, but the other way. We just want to feel how the top of the figure of eight and the bottom of the figure of eight just feel very different. And then if we feel that, we can keep them both going. So you see, when we do the figure of eight exercise, one hand is going over the top of its figure of eight, and the other hand is coming underneath its figure of eight. So I have these two feelings there all the time. It's just switching from arm to arm. So one arm has the bright upward going over the top, and the other arm has the dark digging down under. And then they swap round. I just need to keep the central equilibrium. So what that means is I have to be able to keep in my mind the up and the down going concurrently without cancelling each other out and just producing this frozen stiffness. So part of me is going up, and another part of me has to be going down to balance that, and then they switch round. And it's as they switch, as the one that's going up starts to come down and the one that goes down starts coming up, that's the magical point. And that's what we want to really savor. So it's the top and the bottom of the figure of eight, but also there's that other point in the middle, this sort of point of inflection in the middle, where the arms seem to cross. So what we used to do with John was just imagine, this is what the Chinese do all the time, they imagine like a yin-yang symbol in front of them. So like a circle. And within that circle, there's an eight. There's a figure eight, and it's just enclosed in the circle. So the top and the bottom are touching the circle. And then you just trace that figure of eight, but you do it with each hand. So you're tracing the same eight. But as you go over the top with one hand, you're going underneath with the other. And so this point in the middle where the two hands cross and touch, that becomes quite strong. So you have this point as they both go through the middle, where one elbow is really pulled down and the other one is really pulled up. So it's like our riding horse becoming the golden urn. So it's the same idea. This is like the golden urn, and this is like the riding horse. So they're both there all the time. I'm slipping in and out. Just creates like a sort of ripple in the spine. And it softens the legs. So if we just bring the feet up a bit. So as we do it, it tends to want to do this. The knees tend to want to come together, like in single whip. When we're doing single whip and we get to here where the knees are really together. So that has to be a possibility within our movements. We don't just want to be knees out, bandy-legged all the time. Still doing the figure of 8 in each foot. So there's a lot happening. So to keep all the activity going, one's energy has to really intensify. And this is the idea of any exercise. You keep your mind on it, then just the simple doing of the exercise will intensify the system. And then you'll be much more inclined to keep everything going, to keep all the energies buoyant and interacting. This way of working always reminds me of Sun Lutang. Some wonderful photographs of him in these sort of crazy tight postures. So sacrum heavy, heart over the sacrum. The sacrum is the keel of the boat, stopping you from listing too severely. And then let's bring it up. Keep this feeling of this going in the legs, if nowhere else. So my feet are trying to do these 2 figures of 8s on the ground. Imagine you're on wet sand, you'd gradually be wriggling your way into the sand because there's always this movement in the feet. The foot seems to be flat on the ground, but there's this figure of 8 of activity within the foot. So the feet, the hands, and the face, that's where the figures of 8 should express most clearly. So you're sort of going through sort of contortions with your face as you're trying to get, there's like a figure of 8 going around your jaw like this. And there's a figure of 8 going around your eyes like this.